It's been 15 years since Amy and I tied the knot. Looking back now, I can barely recognize the couple we once were. Young, naive, and hopelessly in love, at least, I was. Amy had this spark about her, the kind of energy that could light up a room. She was the life of every party, confident and stunning, and for some reason, she chose me. We met in college, back when I was a junior and she was a sophomore. It was at one of those wild frat parties where the beer was cheap and the music was loud. She caught my eye from across the room, laughing with her friends, her curly blonde hair shining under the tacky string lights. It felt like a movie moment when we locked eyes. From that night on, we were inseparable. 2 years later, I graduated and moved a few hours away for work while Amy stayed behind to finish her senior year. We made it work, though. We had a plan: get married as soon as she graduated, buy a house, and start a family. Everything seemed perfect. But cracks started forming early on, cracks I didn't want to see. Amy had a way of joking about things that stung more than they should have. Little comments here and there about how size doesn't matter or how it's not the tools but the technique. At first, I laughed it off. But as time went on, it became harder to ignore the pointed remarks. You see, I'm not a big guy, not in stature, not in confidence, and, well, not down there either. I always felt I came up short in that department. Amy never outright said anything, but I could sense it. The subtle hesitations, the way she seemed distracted during our intimate moments, and the way she avoided conversations about our physical relationship. It ate at me. I started wondering if I was enough for her. We got married anyway, with me telling myself that love would conquer all. 6 months in, we went to a barbecue hosted by some friends, couples our age who had been together just as long, if not longer. It was one of those nights that would change everything, though I didn't know it yet. Around the fire pit, after a few too many drinks, someone brought up the idea of a celebrity hall pass. I didn't even know what it was until Sadie, a bubbly blonde sitting next to me, explained. It's like this, she said, leaning in conspiratorially. You and your spouse pick one person, a celebrity, usually, that you're allowed to sleep with, no consequences. It's just a fantasy, of course. Well, mostly. I laughed nervously. The idea seemed absurd, but everyone else was nodding like it was perfectly normal. Amy was quiet at first, but I could see the gears turning in her head. Come on, Mark, she nudged me playfully. It's just for fun. Who would you pick? I fumbled for an answer, naming some random actress I barely knew. But when it was Amy's turn, she confidently named the lead actor from her favorite soap opera. Joshua, she said, her eyes lighting up. He's gorgeous. Everyone laughed, and the conversation moved on, but I couldn't shake the image of Amy fantasizing about another man. That night, she was unusually passionate, almost like she was proving a point. Afterward, she admitted that she'd been picturing Joshua. It's just a silly fantasy, she said with a shrug. But for me, it wasn't silly at all. It was the beginning of the end. The barbecue was supposed to be a casual, fun evening, good food, some beers, and laughter with friends. Instead, it turned into the night that planted a seed of doubt I couldn't shake. As we sat around the fire pit, the conversation took a turn I didn't expect. Sadie brought up the celebrity hall pass, explaining it like it was the most normal thing in the world. Just imagine, she said, gesturing dramatically with her wine glass. One night to live out your wildest fantasy with someone completely out of reach. It's harmless. You both agree, no strings attached. I forced a laugh, trying to mask how uncomfortable the idea made me. Amy, on the other hand, was fascinated. She leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand as she listened intently. So, you and Tom actually have this arrangement, she asked, her tone more curious than judgmental. Sadie nodded, looking to her husband for confirmation. Yep, and it works for us. It's about trust, you know? And knowing that at the end of the day, it's just a fantasy. Tom chimed in, it keeps things exciting. I mean, who doesn't want a little spice now and then? The others around the fire agreed, laughing and sharing their pics like it was the most natural thing. When it came to Amy and me, she didn't hesitate. "Joshua Marrow," she said with a grin. "You know, the guy from Lovers of Our Lives. He's perfect." Her enthusiasm stung, though I tried not to let it show. When it was my turn, I muttered some random name, not even really paying attention. My mind was racing. Was this what people did? Was I supposed to be okay with the idea of my wife fantasizing about someone else, wanting someone else? The conversation eventually moved on, but the tension in my chest didn't. That night, when we got home, Amy was all over me. She kissed me with an intensity one hadn't felt in years, dragging me to the bedroom before I even had a chance to take off my shoes. Afterward, as we lay tangled in the sheets, she dropped the bomb. "You know," she said, running her fingers through my hair, "when we were making love, I imagined it was Joshua." I froze. "What?" I asked, hoping I'd misheard her. She laughed lightly, like it was no big deal. "Relax, Mark. It's just a fantasy. You do it too, right?" "No," I said firmly, sitting up. "I don't. When I'm with you, I'm with you." Amy rolled her eyes, brushing me off. "Don't be so serious. It doesn't mean anything." But it did to me. It meant a lot. And in the quiet moments after she fell asleep, I couldn't help but wonder, was I enough for her? Or was I just a placeholder for the fantasy she really wanted? The months following that barbecue were some of the most confusing of my life. On the surface, things seemed fine. Amy and I went about our routine, work, kids, family dinners, but there was a shift in the air. It was subtle at first. Amy seemed distracted, like her mind was elsewhere. She started spending more time scrolling through her phone, laughing at something she wouldn't share. Her comments about intimacy grew sharper, more pointed, like tiny jabs she didn't think I'd notice. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, she dropped another bombshell. "Mark," she started, swirling her wine in the glass, "have you ever thought about spicing things up?" "Spicing things up?" I repeated, already feeling the knot tightening in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she said, shrugging. "Just trying new things. Keeping it exciting." I didn't know how to respond. Our love life had never been particularly wild, but I thought it was solid. Sure, I knew I wasn't the most adventurous or confident in the bedroom. How could I be, knowing the limits of what I had to offer? But this wasn't the first time Amy had brought up the idea of something new, and every time she did, it felt like a spotlight on all the ways I wasn't enough. "What are you saying, Amy?" I asked cautiously. She sighed, setting her glass down and leaning back in her chair. "I'm not saying anything, Mark. I'm just wondering if we're missing out, you know? Other couples seem to have this spark, and sometimes I feel like we're just comfortable." Comfortable. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Wasn't that a good thing? Wasn't being steady and dependable what a marriage was supposed to be about? "I thought comfortable was the goal," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. Amy didn't answer right away. Instead, she gave me a look, a mix of pity and frustration, that sent a chill down my spine. "Mark," she finally said, her voice softer now, "you know I love you. But sometimes it feels like there could be more." There it was. The unspoken truth hanging between us like a storm cloud. She didn't have to say the words for me to know what she meant. For the first time, I wondered if Amy had always felt this way, if she'd been quietly wishing for something or someone else all along. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment of our relationship in my mind. The little comments, the jokes about size, the way her enthusiasm for me seemed to come and go. I hated the way my insecurities crept in, but I couldn't stop them. I couldn't stop wondering if she was right, if I wasn't enough. It started with a phone call. It was late on a Thursday night, and Amy was away at a work conference in Los Angeles. I had just finished putting the kids to bed when my phone buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen, and I smiled as I picked it up, relieved to hear her voice. But the moment she spoke, I knew something was off. "Mark," she shouted over the noise in the background, her words slightly slurred. "You're not going to believe this. Guess who I met?" "What? Who?" I asked, trying to make sense of the chaos on her end. It sounded like she was in a club, music thumping, people shouting. "Joshua," she squealed, giggling like a teenager. "Joshua Marrow. From my soap. Can you believe it? He's here, and he's into me." My stomach dropped. "Amy, what are you talking about?" "I'm using my hall pass," she blurted out, as if it was the most casual thing in the world. "You know, Joshua was my pick. This is my once-in-a-lifetime chance, Mark. You get it, right?" "No, I don't get it," I said, panic rising in my chest. "Amy, what the hell are you saying? You're using your what?" "My hall pass," she repeated, laughing again. "Don't be mad, okay? I knew you'd understand. I'll see you Saturday." "Amy, wait," I shouted, but the call had already ended. I stood there, staring at the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell had just happened? Did she really mean it? Or was it the alcohol talking? Either way, the weight of her words crushed me. I tried calling her back, but every time, it went straight to voicemail. I left message after message, begging her to call me, to tell me she was joking, to assure me that she wasn't doing something stupid. But deep down, I knew the truth. She wasn't joking. That night was the longest of my life. I barely slept, replaying her words over and over in my head. The worst part was how excited she sounded, how happy she was at the thought of being with another man. A man who wasn't me. By Friday morning, I was a wreck. Amy still hadn't responded to my calls or texts. I took the kids to my parents' house after work, not wanting them around if things got ugly when she returned. But the pit in my stomach told me things had already gone too far. After dropping the kids off, I went to Jack's house. His wife, Jenny, had gone on the same trip with Amy, and I thought maybe she knew something. Jack was surprised to see me when he opened the door, but he let me in without question. "What's going on, Mark?" he asked. "I need your help," I said, my voice shaking. "Amy called me last night, and she sounded strange. I can't get a hold of her now. Can you call Jenny and see if she knows anything?" Jack nodded, pulling out his phone. "Sure thing, but what's going on? Did something happen?" I hesitated. "Just don't tell Jenny I'm here, okay? I don't want Amy knowing I'm asking about her." Jack gave me a puzzled look but didn't push. He dialed Jenny's number and put the call on speaker. His wife answered almost immediately. "Hi, honey," she chirped. "You must have ESP, I just got back to my room." They chatted for a bit, catching up on her trip, before Jack casually brought up Amy. "So, have you seen much of Amy? Mark called me earlier, said he was trying to get in touch with her." There was a long pause on Jenny's end, and when she finally spoke, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Jack, don't tell him I said this, but I haven't seen Amy since last night. We were all drinking at the club when Joshua Marrow came over to our table. Amy lost it, she got his autograph, danced with him a few times, and then, well, she left with him." Jack's brow furrowed as he glanced at me. "Left with him? What do you mean?" "I mean she left," Jenny said, her voice tense. "She told me she was using her hall pass, that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't listen. She whispered something about how Mark would understand, and then she walked out with him. I haven't seen her since." Jack ended the call, turning to me with a look of disbelief. "Mark, do you guys really have some kind of hall pass agreement?" "No," I said flatly. "We played that stupid game once, years ago, but I made it clear it was just a game. I never agreed to anything like this." Jack nodded slowly. "So, what are you going to do?" I stared at him, the weight of it all crashing down on me. "I don't know," I admitted. "But it's not going to be good." Amy's flight was scheduled to land on Saturday afternoon, and by the time she walked through the door, I was ready. The video camera was set up on a shelf in the living room, discreetly hidden among the books and knickknacks. I wanted everything recorded, every word, every lie, every excuse. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. The garage door rumbled, and I heard the clatter of her suitcase being wheeled into the house. "Mark! I'm home," she called out, her voice as cheerful as if nothing had happened. She rounded the corner into the living room, her face lighting up when she saw me sitting on the couch. "Oh my God, what a crazy trip," she exclaimed, dropping her bag by the door. I stayed seated, trying to keep my voice calm. "Crazy, huh? I've been trying to call you." Her smile faltered for a moment before she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, my phone broke," she said. I dropped it, and the screen shattered. Couldn't use it at all. "Convenient," I muttered under my breath. Amy didn't hear me, or pretended not to. She plopped down on the couch next to me, crossing her legs. Anyway, it was amazing. The conference went great, and we had such a good time. You'll never guess who I met. "I think I can guess," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Amy froze, the cheerful mask slipping for just a moment. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "Joshua Marrow," I said, leaning forward. "You called me Thursday night, remember? Said you were using your hall pass." For a second, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, just as quickly, she recovered, brushing it off with a laugh. "Oh, that? Mark, it was just a joke. I'd had a little too much to drink. Come on, you know I'd never actually." "Don't lie to me, Amy," I cut her off. "I know you left the club with him." Jenny told Jack. "I know everything." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, to my shock, she started to laugh. "Mark," she said, shaking her head, "you're being ridiculous. It was harmless fun. Okay, maybe I danced with him and flirted a little, but that's it. Nothing happened." "Don't," I snapped, my voice rising. "Don't lie to me. You admitted it yourself when you called me. You said you were using your hall pass. You knew exactly what you were doing." Amy's expression shifted from guilty to defensive in an instant. "Oh, come on, Mark," she said, rolling her eyes. "It was one night. It's not like I'm in love with the guy. It was just a moment. A fantasy. Why can't you just let it go?" "Because you cheated on me," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You broke our vows. You didn't just betray me, Amy. You threw our entire marriage away for one night with a soap star." Amy scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "You're being so dramatic. It was nothing. And honestly?" She smirked, her tone turning cruel. "It's not like you've been satisfying me lately anyway." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, stunned, as she continued. "Maybe if you were a little more confident, a little more capable, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. "So that's what this is about? My size? My insecurity? That's your excuse?" "It's not an excuse," she snapped. "It's reality. You're just too stubborn to face it." I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice low. "You think this is my fault? That I pushed you to cheat?" Amy stood too, her hands on her hips. "I'm not saying it's all your fault, Mark. But maybe if you stopped acting like a victim for 5 seconds, you'd realize we both have problems." "No," I said firmly, looking her in the eye. "You have a problem. And it's standing right in front of me." Without another word, I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, fuming. My mind was made up. I was done trying to reason with her, done letting her turn this around on me. She'd made her choice, and now I was making mine. By Monday morning, I was sitting across from Vicky Sampson, a divorce lawyer known for her ruthless approach to cases like mine. I laid everything out: Amy's confession on the phone, Jenny's testimony, and the years of little digs and comments that had chipped away at my self-worth. Vicky listened carefully, taking notes with a steely expression. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. "You've got a solid case," she said. "If what you're saying is true, this isn't just about adultery, it's about systematic emotional abuse. And if you've got evidence to back it up, we can bury her." I handed over the flash drive with the recordings I'd made, Jenny's phone call, Amy's giddy confession when she got home, and the autographed photo I'd found hidden in her briefcase. "Is this enough?" I asked. Vicky grinned. "More than enough. But if we're going to win this, we need to play it smart. Let her think she's got the upper hand. Don't confront her again, don't give her any reason to suspect you've lawyered up. Just act normal until the papers are served." That was easier said than done. Living under the same roof as Amy felt like torture. She alternated between cold indifference and biting sarcasm, making it clear she didn't regret her actions. "You're being ridiculous, Mark," she sneered one night as I set up the guest room for another night apart. "You're acting like I killed someone. It was one night. Get over it." But I wasn't about to get over it. Every time she threw a jab at me, it only steeled my resolve. I focused on gathering every shred of evidence I could find. Credit card statements revealed the name of the club she'd gone to, and her iCloud account held damning photos of her and the man she thought was Joshua Merrow. It wasn't him, Vicky's investigator confirmed that much, but that didn't make it any less damning. By the time Friday rolled around, the plan was in motion. Vicky had arranged for Amy to be served with divorce papers at her workplace, a public humiliation she'd never see coming. My role was to stay calm and avoid giving her any warning. That afternoon, I dropped the kids off at my parents' house and waited for the inevitable explosion. It didn't take long. The garage door slammed shut, and Amy stormed into the living room, her face red with fury. "You son of a bitch," she screamed, throwing the papers onto the coffee table. "How dare you humiliate me like this? At work? In front of everyone?" I stayed seated, keeping my voice steady. "You brought this on yourself, Amy." "Oh, don't you dare," she hissed, her eyes blazing. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? This is about your ego, Mark. That's all it's ever been about. You couldn't handle the idea that I might want more, so now you're trying to ruin me." "More?" I repeated, incredulous. "Amy, you cheated on me. You broke our vows, and now you're blaming me for it." She laughed bitterly. "Oh, please. You've always been insecure, Mark. Always. And now you're trying to punish me because I had one night, where I felt like a woman again." I stood up, towering over her despite my smaller frame. "You didn't feel like a woman, Amy. You felt powerful. You felt like you could do whatever you wanted and get away with it. But not anymore." Her face twisted in rage. "You think you're going to win this? You have no proof. None. It's your word against mine." I smiled. "We'll see about that." The courtroom was packed on the day of our hearing. Amy's lawyer was confident, arguing that I was making baseless accusations out of jealousy and insecurity. Amy sat there, smirking, as if she'd already won. But then Vicky stood up and presented the evidence. The recordings, the photos, the damning text messages Amy hadn't bothered to delete. The piece de resistance was the revelation that the man Amy had been with wasn't even a celebrity, it was a professional lookalike with a reputation for targeting married women. Amy's face went pale as the truth unraveled before everyone. When the judge delivered his ruling, upholding the terms of our prenup and awarding me full custody of the kids, she broke down in tears. It was over. But the worst blow came as we left the courtroom. A news crew, tipped off by Vicky, ambushed Amy with cameras and microphones. "Mrs. Butler," one reporter called out, how does it feel to lose your family for a one-night stand with a fake soap star? Amy snapped. She lunged at the reporter, fists flying, until a deputy had to restrain her with a taser. The footage went viral, and by the end of the day, Amy was not just the subject of gossip, she was a national laughingstock. The days following the courtroom drama were surreal. I should have felt triumphant. After all, I'd won. Amy was exposed for who she really was, and I had custody of the kids. But all I felt was hollow. Amy's public meltdown became the talk of the town, and not just our town. Clips of her attacking the reporter played on every major news outlet, turning her into an internet meme. Crazy Hall Pass Lady, they called her. For a while, I couldn't even leave the house without someone recognizing me. Strangers would stop me in the grocery store, offering sympathetic looks or pats on the back. Good for you, they'd say. You did the right thing. But none of it felt right. The kids were devastated, especially Julie. At 15, she understood more than I wanted her to. She'd pieced together the truth before I ever said a word, and now she was angry at Amy, at me, at the world. Our younger son, Chris, was too young to understand fully, but he knew something was wrong. He missed his mom, no matter what she'd done. As for Amy, her life fell apart almost overnight. She lost her job. Apparently, assaulting a reporter on camera wasn't a good look for an associate principal. With her reputation in tatters, she moved in with her mother, who wasn't exactly thrilled to have her back. Supervised visitation with the kids was her only connection to the life she'd destroyed, and even those visits were strained. Julie barely spoke to her, and Chris was too confused to know how to act. 3 months after the dust had settled, Amy called me out of the blue. Her voice was shaky, almost desperate. "Mark," she said, "I need to talk to you. Please. Just give me a chance." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at her mom's house. Part of me was curious to hear what she had to say. Another part wanted closure. When I arrived, Amy looked like a shadow of her former self. Her once perfect hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup. She seemed smaller somehow, her usual confidence replaced with something I'd never seen in her before, humility. "Mark," she started, tears already welling up in her eyes. "I don't even know where to begin. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know. I'm sorry. For everything." I stayed silent, letting her talk. She poured out her heart, apologizing for the affair, for the lies, for the years of cutting remarks that had chipped away at me. "I was selfish," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I let my own insecurities and stupid fantasies ruin everything. And now, I've lost it all." When she finished, she looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Mark, I love you. I miss you. I miss our family. Please, give me another chance. I'll be the best wife, the best mother. I swear, I'll make it right." I took a deep breath, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "Amy," I said slowly, "I believe you mean every word. But you don't understand what you're asking. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything we built together. And the truth is, I can't trust you anymore." "Mark," she whispered, her voice breaking, "please." "No," I said firmly. "I can't. And I won't. I've spent too many years doubting myself because of you. I'm done." Amy burst into tears, but I didn't stay to comfort her. I stood, turning toward the door. As I walked away, her sobs followed me, but I didn't look back. Life didn't get easier after that, but it did get better. Slowly. I focused on the kids, on rebuilding a sense of stability for them. Julie, ever the pragmatic one, adjusted quickly. "You did the right thing, Dad," she told me one night as we sat on the porch. "Mom made her choices. Now we have to make ours." Chris was a little harder to reach. He missed his mom in ways he couldn't express, and for a while, he acted out. But with time, he settled, and our little family found a new rhythm. As for me, I started therapy, not just for the divorce, but for the years of self-doubt and insecurity that had built up in me. It wasn't easy, facing all the things I tried to bury, but it was necessary. I learned to stop blaming myself for Amy's choices, to stop measuring my worth by anyone else's standards. It's been a year now since everything fell apart. I'm still single, still figuring out who I am outside of being a husband and a father. But for the first time in a long time, I feel free. Free to be me, flaws and all. And Amy? She still calls sometimes, though less frequently now. I don't answer. I don't need to. Her chapter in my life is over. And for the first time in years, I'm okay with that.